School is out, but the Hardy Boys are reruns. I make a collage out of all my old Tiger Beats and Teen Beats. I find all the Shaun Cassidy pictures. I got tons of them. I paste them together, all the shades that kind of look the same, so I can make a big face out of little Shaun Cassidy faces. I want it to be like, from far away, it just kind of looked like anybody's face, but when you get close up, you see that all the little pieces that make up the face are all pictures of Shaun Cassidy. I'm making it all on a big piece of white cardboard. Daddy come in the living room with a drink. He looked down at me on the floor with my stuff all spread out. He say, "What are you doing, Ave?" I tell him I'm making a big face out of all the little faces. Daddy take another drink. "What are you watching?" he asked. "Hardy Boys, Daddy," I say. Daddy look at my collage and then at the TV. "Ain't nothing else on?" "I don't know," I say. "I want to watch this." Daddy stand there like he got more to say, but then he just leave me. It take me 3 hours to do my Shaun Cassidy. I finish it in my room because Owen kicked me out of the living room. He want to watch TV, but he don't want to watch all that white shit, he says. In my room, I tape my Shaun Cassidy on the wall. Then on the floor underneath him, I spread out some Now and Laters, Pop Rocks, Pixie Sticks, and Red Hots. I like how the candy looked mixed up all together, and maybe Shaun Cassidy like all that kind of candy. To me, John don't look like him anymore. He wish. Shaun Cassidy is a total babe, and John is a total dog. Like I even care about that doofus anyway. Before I go to bed tonight, I'm going to get on my knees and say my prayers in front of Shaun Cassidy. Dear God, now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep. If I should die before I wake, I pray the Lord my soul to take. God bless everybody, amen. Dear Shaun Cassidy, I love you. I love you, Shaun Cassidy. When you sing, "Hey Deanie, won't you come out tonight?" I pretend you're singing it to me, Shaun Cassidy. Shaun Cassidy, please. So that's the end of that section. Then I'm not unlike that weird kid who bought Tiger Beats. So again, just, you know, this idea that Avery's aiming for something that's impossible to achieve and problematic that she's aiming for that to begin with, that there's something going wrong in terms of what she's exposed to and what she internalizes and what she values. And so I was just trying to discuss that there. And the last section I'll read, though, is kind of Avery getting beyond all that and her relationship with Massimo, which is problematic. It's got its own issues, but this section in relation to this section I just read, bumping up against each other, I hope informs the reader of kind of how far Avery's come, or how far she needs to keep going. Massimo claims that he buys white sheets especially for me because I look like art, like a sculpture, all twisted up in them, my ass barely concealed by bunched up cotton, a brown thigh protruding from a white shroud. Massimo loves crisp white sheets. He chose the heavy cool duvet, which he maintained its perfect whiteness, which has maintained its perfect whiteness and bluish hue. The black dress that I've laid out on our bed in consideration for tonight's show looks dramatic against the sheets. It's expensive because someone's name is in it. The other outfit is jeans and a black turtleneck. I will be uncomfortable in the jeans because I will know that I'm supposed to look like something else. But I will also be uncomfortable in the dress because I don't like black dresses. They are too somber and formal, no matter how they cling to the body. It's always difficult to choose which will be the least crazy making. In the jeans, I won't look the part of an artist, won't look elegant and sophisticated, but in the dress, I will feel as though I am in costume. I want to feel as though I am only wearing my skin. Sometimes, Massimo pulls me close and runs his fingers all over my skin, and sometimes over my scalp until he gets drowsy. He likes it when my hair is just a little longer so he can feel the kinks and waves of texture. He likes my hair nappy, he says, and he makes me laugh the way he says it. stressing the first syllable and holding it much too long. Nappy, he says slowly, as though he's making love to the words. And I can feel his hardness against my ass. Hard because of me, my skin, my hair, my ass, my lips. Nappy, he whispers in my ear and caresses my breasts. Early on, when Massimo and I were first dating, I asked him, "What else do you see in me?" Was he just trying to get me in bed? Of course, he said, don't waste your time on the obvious. But also, he saw someone trying to say something and do something just like him. He saw someone trying to put one foot in front of the other. Sometimes, though, he saw that I stood completely still, which he hated. And I moved sideways and back and forth and diagonally. I had many steps that Massimo had to learn. It was difficult for both of us, but he learned them. And that's how I grew to love Massimo. He loves my skin, yes, but this is the least of it. He finally stopped trying to tell me who I was. He simply let me show him, for better and for worse, for everyone involved. The colors and textures of such basic things, skin, hair, eyes, or even the color of black and the color of white, is what I am always trying to get to. There is always something underneath the name. To say something is gray is to say nothing. The human eye can distinguish nearly 500 shades of gray. If gray is this complicated, so are all the other colors. When Massimo says black and he's talking about me, I hear in his voice all the things he's trying to name for what he sees. Me, though, I painted, but at some point I got tired of color, of trying to define it perfectly. That's when I started collage and also began to create pieces, messages, from whatever I could modify, interpret, adapt. Found bits of things for the distinctions that are so hard to explain. There's something else I try to explain to Massimo, something about him that I love. He doesn't see it in himself, but he has a center that is immovable in the middle of motion. He's impatient. He can be volatile, emotional, impulsive, hair trigger. You stereotype me, he always cries. You're not being PC just because I'm Italian, he says, whenever I go on about his temper. But his stillness in the middle of motion is extraordinary. You don't travel as far as he has without having it. I told him that he reminded me of Fernando Valenzuela, lifting his right leg high and looking up to the sky before he pitches. It looks messy. It looks like he's not keeping his eye on what he's supposed to be focused on. But then at the very last minute, he pulls it together and his changed speeds on you, or that screwball he has just thrown, strange like a reverse curve, is already a memory. Don't you see it, I had asked, more convinced of my theory the more I thought about it. No, Massimo had said, running out of patience. He thinks baseball has nothing to do with him. Avery, he said, enough. Don't be silly. And so, again, in that section, I was working in this other extended metaphor about baseball and America and all of this, and kind of how Massimo sees Avery, which I think is still problematic. There's a lot of exoticizing going on, and to some degrees, Massimo sees or tries to see in Avery kind of essentialist notions about blackness, which she's tried to break him up throughout the novel. And their relationship continues and gets more complicated, and they drive each other crazy. Of course, because he's European, he doesn't see America in the way Avery does, and so there's always that struggle. But I guess I will stop reading there. It's been about a half hour or so. And I've jumped all around just to give you a sense of the book, but I welcome any questions about any section I read or anything I've talked about, anything that's compelling to you.
I can ask the obvious question, which is how autobiographical is it?
Yeah.
Or is it not at all?
Okay, this is like a hard question because I painted myself into a corner because it's autobiographical in that I was born in LA, I moved to West Covina, I went to USC, my parents are from Tennessee, all of that is the same as Avery and the same as me. But then, most of the events in the novel that I wrote about didn't happen. So there's no Massimo, there's no Italian in the Hollywood Hills. There's me living alone in my loft downtown LA. My husband's Southern and he lives in Alabama. So there's just, these things aren't quite, I mean, several scenes just throughout, they didn't happen, but what I will say is a lot of the things that Avery experiences and thinks about are things that I think about, or that I experienced in that idea of someone made me ashamed of how I looked at some point in my life. But maybe they didn't do it as represented in the book. But, so I had to come up with a much more interesting fictional way of making it just more compelling than some minor thing that happened. So there's a lot of, I would say, emotionally autobiographical, if that's not cheating, but not literally autobiographical. Yeah.
How did you decide on the dual narrative of the book? Like, did you originally at one point just write in Avery's younger voice or in the older voice, or how did that kind of
Now, from the outset, I knew that I wanted a dual narrative because there's all this stuff I'm doing in the novel about journeys and distances and travel, and for one thing, Avery's, she's obsessed with Laura Ingalls Wilder, and there's this whole thing about traveling west, and kind of the same thing is happening to Avery. But I figure that when you look at a person and you see them and you think you know them, that all the distances that they've traveled, those distances, that's invisible. So you just think, oh, I know that person, she sounds like this, and she comes from this. And you have no idea what it took or kind of what happened to get there. And I was thinking of that a long time ago. I met someone, and she had said to me something about, oh, you wouldn't have any knowledge about that because I'm sure you went to prep school or something weird. And I was just thinking, wow, I can't, that's so far from my experience, and yet she thinks this person's putting together something by hearing me speak or how I carry myself, whatever it is. And so I just wanted to discuss that, kind of how complicated identity is, and that you have no idea where someone comes from. So when you're turning the pages, and at 1 minute you get Avery when she's 9, but she's also getting ready for her show, that's kind of jolting, because you're thinking, oh, there's this accomplished person, but here she is obsessing over Sean Cassidy. How does she go from there to that, you know? And she gets older, so she's 9, and then she's 12, and then she's 15, and then she's in high school, and then she's in college, and so I love that her voice shifts throughout. So the section that I read when she's younger, she's, like I said, 10, and the more assimilated and educated she becomes, her voice shifts. And there's some kind of Valley Girl speak for a while where she adopts. And there was a scene that my editor cut, actually, because it goes on and on, like, oh my God, you guys. And he's like, she's so annoying, we can't have this. We just gotta get rid of this. This is like a little bit goes along, we get it. That's how she talked for a moment in her life. And so, but just again, like adopting various identities as she moved on in her life, just putting on costume, or maybe that just is her until she moves on and becomes something else. So I couldn't imagine chapter 1 through 25. I just didn't think that served my themes as well as I live life. So, yeah.
You deal with, obviously some heavy issues about race in America in the book, but I also noticed how funny it was. Yeah. Was that like a concerted effort on your part to bring a little levity in the book? Can you talk a little bit about
Yeah, I really wanted it to be as funny as these kinds of things can be. Because they're not like, you know, racism, a laugh riot. It's like, that's not how racism works usually. But it can be funny too, and I just thought, just kind of reading this kind of rant about how things sucked isn't fun for people to read. And so I did, thank you for saying that you noticed the humor in it, because I tried really hard to make moments funny. But then at the same time, kind of, ooh, that's harsh, but funny, but kind of harsh. Yeah.
What about the art? Is that art that you would like to do or have done?
I would love to. I tried to take an art class in preparation or research for the novel. So sad. I remember drawing, the first day I was supposed to draw a coffee mug, and it looked like it just somehow didn't translate. It looked like a wallet or something. Not what I intended. But I often think of the world in that way, where I'll see something and I'll think, oh, you know, that would be funny if it looked like this, or if I were a painter, I would represent it this way. So I love art and painting, and but I don't know how to do it. And the other thing was, I'm a writer, and that's how I break down the world and kind of make pieces, make it fit together. And I just can't stand novels that are about writers and writing. I just feel like there's so much going on in the world and people doing jobs and things. And I just couldn't stand to do that. So I worked really hard to make her seem, or that vision of the world through an artist, painter's eyes. I was hoping I achieved that. It's kind of a cheat because I'm not any good at that sort of thing myself. I was just trying to do that. But someone like Kara Walker, if you don't know her work, I love what she does. And it's so startling and kind of angry and funny. And so I was just thinking, what if Avery was kind of a knockoff Kara Walker without as much skill? But just, and she's, you know, not a famous artist, Avery. She's not famous, she's just kind of dabbling. She lives with this man, and she can afford to do her work. And she's doing it because she loves it, but not because she intends to get famous or anything. Like most of us who do things that we love. That's why we do it, just because it interests us or it compels us.
Kind of a question about the voice and the shift over the novel. Is there something in particular, like is part of the progression of the novel tracing what shapes that voice, or is that just kind of a background thing? Does that make sense? Like, what catalyzes the change in the voice? Is that something the novel is concerned with, or is that kind of a background issue when the voice shifts?
Yeah, to a certain degree. Like for instance, the very first third of the novel is not punctuated except for periods, so there's no apostrophes and things like that. It's much more impressionistic. So what I meant to show was, you know, you're a kid, you're not thinking about grammar. You just hear words and you just say what you say, and so it's all kind of clean. And there's a certain point in the novel when she moves to the white neighborhood and she kind of really takes note, wow, these people, they sound different than what I understand to be kind of normal. And so after that point, I start the punctuation, because that's kind of like a seminal moment in her life. And then later in the novel, it was a scene that was cut. It was after the Valley Girl stuff, where the father says to her, this is not in the novel, but in the scene that I'd written, he said to her, he overheard her speaking that way, and he said, you know you sound stupid, right? That just sounds stupid, and you can't get along in this world like that. Some people can speak like that, but you looking the way you do, you don't have the privilege of sounding stupid when you open your mouth. And so, cut to her answering phones at USC, and the woman there said that she sounded so articulate and great when she answered the phone. And so that was Avery kind of understanding what her father had to say about language and how it worked, and who had the privilege of sounding silly. and who doesn't have the privilege of sounding silly. And so, yeah, to a certain degree, what happened in the book informed that language. But a lot of those scenes were cut, so. Yeah. But I had a good time. I love language, I love voice, and so it was really fun to try and do that. And so when things were cut and moved around, it was hard because the editor, my editor, Dan Smetana, he would cut something and move it, and so then he'd say, I want you to write something new here, and then I'd have to remember, it was very schizophrenic, like, okay, let me go back to 10-year-old Avery, although I just wrote 40 pages of old Avery, so now I gotta go back to that section which I wrote a year ago or something. It was just really weird and hard, and I think I pulled it off, though there's one section actually where I think she reverts in a way that she wouldn't have, just like a page or two that I just couldn't quite nail, but I think most people hopefully don't notice that. I didn't.
Thanks.
Well, thank you. Thanks. It was such a pleasure to read here and be in New York. So thank you all for coming.